So I chair Friends of Merrymeeting Bay. For those of you that don't know, Merrymeeting Bay is behind me this way. It is a unique body of water in the whole wide world. It's the junction of 6 rivers that come together, the 2 largest being the Androscoggin and the Kennebec. Drains almost 40% of the state of Maine, and it goes down through a little 200-meter bedrock slot called the Chops. Many estuaries around the world, what makes this unique is that the 2 main tributaries come in opposition. The entrance egress is restrained by this gap, and so it's basically the fresh water going out that backs up to make the tides. It's tidal riverine. Geologically, it's called an inland delta, and it's the only body of water in the state of Maine that provides spawning and nursery habitat for all of the migratory or diagenous fish species in the Gulf, of which there are about a dozen. Eels, Atlantic salmon, alewives, blueback herring, striped bass, a couple kinds of sturgeon, etc. Also, the largest staging area in the fall for migratory waterfowl north of Chesapeake Bay, and the second hottest spot for bald eagle recovery in the state of Maine after Cobscook Bay, and home to about a dozen rare plants, some of which are globally rare. I was asked to talk about sort of the ecological perspective, I guess, the local ecological perspective, and I'm going to do that with a few topics relating to community conversion and climate, and those are the wetlands, toxics issues associated with BIW, dredging versus migratory fish, what kind of money, what war machine money can buy for the ecosystem. And then I want to talk about hazards of wireless proliferation in military and civil society. So quickly, I wrote a fair bit here, and I'll kind of skim down through. In order, wetlands and toxics. There's a long history of wetland fill over there. Many of you know that. Damage from the yard. A long history of toxics and abuse. Jason mentioned something that might be happening recently. I actually did call the DEP about that this morning, and I'm waiting for a call back to see just what that water was, because it wasn't clear in the permit. Would these issues be less under civilian conversion, something that we've talked about a lot? And by the way, I felt great handing out Bruce's letter, because if the president and the governor and our entire delegation could talk about conversion, then why couldn't I talk about it and bring that up to people? So I couldn't, though. Well, I did, but here I am now. So instead of doing a boat tour. So yeah, likely there'd be less wetland destruction because further expansion of the facility is probably unlikely, although not assured. Let's say they went to building merchant ships. I like to expand the focus of the term community to include ecological community. Since we are a part of that, albeit something of an alien part much of the time, we still live and die by how we integrate with that ecological community. Certainly, oversight of toxic pollutants would increase under civilian conversion, whether the yard went to building merchant ships, rail cars, photovoltaics, wind turbines, or something else. The military, as a lot of us know, too often gets a free pass. Climate change, with increasing warmth, we're seeing higher sea levels, and actually the Gulf of Maine, I believe, is one of the highest. It's got one of the highest rates of increase of any place in the world. So increasingly severe weather events, and so our wetland values only increase because of their buffering abilities. So they're very, very valuable, not only for providing habitat for little fish, but for buffering the climatic changes that we're seeing. Dredging versus migratory fish. As mentioned, the bay and the lower Kennebec host all these great fish species in the Gulf of Maine. Some are endangered, some are threatened, some are species of concern. These are all technical sort of designations. If dredging is done according to the existing permit for the yard, at a time of year when most of these fish aren't here, the effect on the fish is minimal. It's limited. The effect is limited mostly to deposition, and whether it affects dredging, whether it affects wetlands or shellfish and lobster in some of the downstream dumping sites. Friends of Merrymeeting Bay and some other groups actually a number of years ago filed suit in federal court, and we've been in court quite a few times, over the timing of dredging. At that point, it was going to be in the summer, and we lost because of national security. What that meant ultimately was that that ship, which was going in and out anyway with a local pilot, even though the channel wasn't dredged, had to get to a christening in Key West for a big party in a certain amount of time, and they couldn't wait a little bit extra. So with conversion, I think it's safe to assume that even if the shipbuilding continues, the national security card is off the table. So that's a plus. Vis-a-vis climate changes, I think that, and the dredging issues, hard to say, but I think we might see increased deposition as we see bigger storm events, but we'll probably also see more flushing. Might be a wash, I don't know. What will military dollars buy? There's no end to alternative beneficiaries of conversion. I know everyone in this room can think of better and more worthwhile ways to spend the money that goes into the military funding now, whether ecological, health, education, energy, jobs related. I've just got one ecological community example for you. Since 60% of our species live in riparian zones, or the zones along the rivers, which I consider analogous to our arteries, and I consider migratory fish to be analogous to the oxygen in our blood. Behind me is the head of tide up the Androscoggin River here. Most of you know where that is, between Brunswick and Topsham and the bridge. And the dam there's a fishway there, which for all its faults is a pretty good sized fishway. One of the Zumwalt ships over there with no windows in it could fund about 1,150 of those fishways. That's a lot of fishways. And I heard on the radio just coming here that the regular Aegis, models they normally build cost about a quarter of that. So you could figure that, and they're planning to build some that are even more expensive. So that's a lot of fishery restoration, which is sort of where our focus is.
5 minutes.
Okay. One story here. A number of years ago, a dam came out, the Fort Halifax Dam, which was at the bottom of the Sebasticook River, comes into the Kennebec near Waterville. And it's been a few years now, been about 8 years, and the alewives, which are little river herring, have come back into the river, and there's now 10 miles of Sebasticook up to the first dam, which is called Benton Falls. Everyone loves to eat alewives. That's probably about their purpose in life. And blueback herring as well, both river herring. They're now passing about 3.5 million alewives over the Benton Falls Dam in a fish elevator. And the word has gotten out that that restaurant is open. And I fly eagle surveys every year, and nest surveys, and we've got up there, and this year we flew in 80 eagles up there. And it's just incredible to see that kind of abundance in our natural world. It's like, oh, there's Alaska right here in Maine, And not only the eagles, but everyone here has probably seen eagles chase osprey and they drop the fish, perfect national bird, right? So, but up there, there's food for everybody. And the ospreys are eating and the eagles are eating, and they don't bother each other. I called the guy who runs that fishway a couple of years ago, and while he's on the phone with me, hanging out on top of the dam, he's watching striped bass come up there. This is like 60 miles up from the ocean, chasing alewives into the shallows. Alewife gets in the shallow, gets away from the striped bass, think they've got it made, and a great blue heron is there and stabs the alewife. And then there are juvenile seals up there that are catching and releasing alewives, learning how to fish. So it's a really beautiful thing. Last point, hazards of wireless. I'm a science kind of guy. In my 50 years or so of doing environmental work, I consider radio frequency radiation from wireless proliferation the greatest toxic threat of our time. Kind of like, Rachel Carson in the pesticides, Silent Spring. Not necessarily because of its acute nature, but because of its spatial and temporal nature. It is everywhere, and it's 24/7. And at our electron and proton cellular core, we are charged particles, okay? We are beings of frequency. The odd thing is not that many people are reacting badly to man-made, EMF exposure, electromagnetic frequencies. The odd thing, the crazy thing would be if not having co-evolved with those frequencies, we are not affected, and we are being affected. Imagine what your response would be if you could see this ever-increasing toxic soup of really carcinogenic EMF waves. The two main problems are non-cancer effects and cancer. Many studies cite a range of 3 to 13% of exposed populations as currently electrohypersensitive. Some studies suggest 30% because many people don't understand the cause of their symptoms, and they're very varied. The National Toxicology Program of the NIH found a whole body exposure to low-level radiofrequency radiation like that emitted by cell phones and smart meters causes brain and heart tumors in rats. Proliferation is harming not only people in an ever-increasing population of electrosensitives, and we're all susceptible, but wildlife and plants as well. So our military has played a large and often lead role in the development of wireless issues, from early radar use to current electromagnetic pulse weapons that are being used on citizen protesters around the country and around the world. Radar sickness, aka microwave sickness, aka electromagnetic hypersensitivity, all variations of the same problem. I've not actually measured effects of the microwave intensity at General Dynamics, but with the increasing electronic sophistication of today's military, I'd expect some improvement with a conversion, civilian conversion. Any reduction in microwave emissions has obvious benefits to the community, and there are also theories on how the increase in radio frequency radiation is a factor in atmospheric warming, although I'm a bit skeptical of some of those. You should also know that there are massive efforts to deploy various atmospheric platforms, enabling wireless access worldwide, not going to be able to get away from it. These are via balloons, drones, and many, many thousands of satellites, the launching and maintenance of which is without question contributing to global warming because of the rocket emission exhaust ingredients. Interested in that some more, check out the Global Union Against Radiation Deployment from Space, or GARDS. Website is stopglobalwifi.org, or the research section of our main Coalition to Stop Smart Meter site. There are some little cards on the back left table that talk about some hints for radiation safety and have the websites on them. So from the perspectives of the community and climate, very little doubt in my mind that peacetime conversion would be a step in the right direction. All right, so thank you.
Thank you.